Yeah. It is 6 p.m. and we have a lot of ground to cover tonight, so we'll go ahead and get started. I wanted to thank you all for coming to tonight's meeting. We're starting the meeting. Why don't we go ahead and start by doing introductions? We'll start over with Harold.
Oh, before we start, we have new microphones at the desk there, so you'll actually need to engage them by pushing the button every time you're going to talk. You can leave them on if you'd like, but you can also turn them off.
Good evening. I'm Harold Folker.
Carmen Matthews.
Rob Miles.
Coco Sutton.
Stephanie Kilmer.
Rick Rayfeld.
Drew Farmer.
Joe Benetti.
Eli Gonzalez.
Alan Gibb.
Lucinda DeNovo.
Brenda Brecky. Christine Sylvester.
Nicole Rutherford.
And Roger Craddock.
Melissa Olson.
Jennifer Wersing.
Jim Hossley.
And we'll have our other speakers, when they come up, introduce themselves as they come up. We're going to start with the overview of, better get the right one, overview of the budget.
Yes.
Roger, just wanted to mention that Sarah Stevens here online.
Thank you, Sarah. Sorry we missed you there. We have a PowerPoint coming up. Mine's always on.
Yeah.
That's why we got the longer necks.
Can we hit the lights? That might be helpful. All right. So this is going to be very familiar for those of you who were here last year. It's similar, a little bit shortened, but this is just intended to provide an overview of the budget process. So the things we will talk about just briefly is a background, the mechanics, which is the structure of the budget and our funds, and then some additional information such as property taxes, accounting, and the process we're going to go through with the budget committee here. So background. Good question. What is a budget? It's actually a legal document for the city of Coos Bay. It lawfully allows us to spend funds after it's been appropriated through this process that we'll walk through. It is a financial plan for the city. It is a one-year plan, and it's based on an estimate of revenues and expenses. It's an internal control mechanism. The auditors look to us to create some controls around fiscal responsibility. It's a policy document that funds the plans and the priorities of the city. And it's also used for public communication. It expresses the city's goals to the citizens. Public budget law is a statute for the state of Oregon. And in that statute, you'll find that it establishes standard procedures that we have to do through this process. It outlines the programs and fiscal policies that we should follow. It requires that we do that estimation of revenues and expenses. It helps to place some controls around the expenditures of public funds. It encourages citizen involvement. We don't see a lot of that often, but we like to encourage it. The budget process, just kind of an overview. The budget officer, who is the city manager, myself and our finance director work with our city staff to prepare the budget that's sitting there before you. That's a several-month process. We're very happy to be here tonight. We made it this far. From this point forward, the Budget Committee is going to review what's presented before you, have the option to make some revisions. And then your goal tonight is to hopefully approve the budget. We do have capacity for another meeting if so needed. And once you've approved the budget, it will be forwarded to the City Council for adoption in their first meeting in June. The City Council will actually hold a public hearing for presentation of this budget to allow for public input. They can also make further revisions within a certain guideline, and their goal is to adopt the budget, places that in service for the next fiscal year. Again, that's our legal budget. That's how we can spend money for the upcoming fiscal year. It also allows us to levy the taxes necessary to support the operating, pretty much the operating of the general fund. So the Budget Committee, as you can see, it consists of City Council and a like number of citizens. The primary rules is to hear the budget message. We will have budget message for both the Urban Renewal Agency and the city. We will have a public hearing because we need to discuss such things as state revenue sharing, how the public might have an opinion on that. Of course, if there's any public in attendance, we would listen to those public comments. Going to get some opportunity to review the proposed budget and then make any revisions that you deem appropriate. And then the goal is to approve that budget. You'll also have some resolution or motions to approve each tax rate and dollar amount, and we'll talk about what that means as far as each tax rate as we move through this. So budget fund and structure. Both of the budgets for the city and the Urban Renewal Agency are organized by funds. And a fund is just a set of accounts that are self-balancing. It's still the record of estimated resources and expenditures, but the funds are generally for a specific activity or purpose. All resources and expenditures must be budgeted to the best of our knowledge, and those need to balance. And those estimates are intended to be done on our, the good faith best estimate we can do at the time of preparation of this budget. Oops, I don't know if it went to. So the first thing is, all funds must balance. You can see here, just a snippet from the budget itself, your revenues are equaling your expenditures. And then common types of funds, general fund, that's most entities will have just a general fund, and then other funds as necessary. We have enterprise funds, water quality and building code as an example of that. Those are funds where there's typically a fee associated with it that can only be used for a specific purpose. Special revenue funds, similar to an enterprise fund, different in that an enterprise fund needs to fund itself. Special revenue funds can accumulate funds, still special purpose though. And then capital improvement funds, those are intended to be for larger kind of purchase items. Debt service funds that we record are outstanding debt obligations. And then reserve funds, where we can set aside funds for a specific purpose in the future. So the funds in Coos Bay's budget, there are 16 active funds in the city's budget. In the operating of the city, we have the general fund, the state gas tax fund, the water quality fund, hotel motel fund, library ESO, building codes, 911 tax fund. We have one debt service fund, that's the GO bond redemption fund. It's related to the fire station construction. Capital improvement budget, we have two capital improvement funds. One is kind of a very general capital improvement, covers all of our larger expenditures. And then the SDC fund, which is an older system development fund. It's been around for a bit. We currently do not have SDC funds, but we do have money we've collected previously in those. Reserve budget, we have several reserve funds, the fire station, and actually that is supposed to be fire equipment reserve fund, the water quality improvement fund, jurisdictional exchange, streets reserve fund, the CAD reserve fund, and the rainy day fund. Fund structures, they will all have resource and expenditure sections. And within expenditure sections, you'll find the following categories. Personnel services, which is where you'll find all of our staff costs. Materials and services, capital outlay, again, those are larger purchase items. Debt service, transfers, which can occur between funds. Contingency is intended to kind of a set aside for unknown expenditures during the year. Reserved, those amounts in that category are intended for generally for debt, and those are amounts you would not touch. Those are needed for upcoming payments. And then unappropriated, that's amounts tonight that we'll decide we are going to leave untouched for this year, and those are intended to roll into next year as our carryover. And this is just an example from the budget. You can kind of see that personnel services, materials and services, debt service, the transfers, contingency, reserves, and unappropriated. The budget document actually has a specific format that it must be in per the state ORS. And it's comprised of several columns. The first two columns are actual columns. Those are amounts from our audited financial statements for the first 2 years immediately preceding the current fiscal year. Then you'll find the current year's adopted budget. That is the budget that was adopted initially, and then any changes that may have occurred throughout the year. Proposed budget is what you're looking at tonight. Once you've approved that, it will move to that next column. These are the columns that are on the far right. That column will then be presented to the council, and then the council, once adopted, will create that third and last column on the right. So just an example of what that looks like. The two actual columns, the current year's adopted budget, the proposed budget. We do also include the GL account number, so as we're walking through the budget tonight, if there's an account you'd like to have some information about, you can reference that. You can also reference the title. And then once we finish our work tonight, we will create another column for the committee approved, and sending it to council for their adoption, we'll create that last column. So just some additional things to think about. Property tax in Oregon. Local governments are allowed to levy 3 types of property taxes, one being the permanent rate levy, which is established a while ago, where all entities have that their own permanent rate, which is unchangeable. General obligation bonds levy, that's going out to the voters and asking for funding for a specific purpose, which we then repay over time. A local option levy, very similar, but usually it's a smaller and shorter period. We only use the first 2, which is the permanent rate and the general obligation. Our permanent rate is $6.3643 per 1,000 of assessed value, and we are estimating to receive a little over $6.9 million in taxes for fiscal year 24. These taxes are received in the general fund, and they are used for city operations. In the for the general obligation bond levy that was approved in May of 2008, was a $6.9 million levy for the construction and equipment of the downtown fire station on Elrod. And we are estimating $493,000 to come in for that bonds levy, which will be used to pay the debt payment in fiscal year 24. And this last little bit is just a reminder that we refinanced that GO bond in fiscal year 21, saving over $800,000, and also reduced the time period for repayment. The Constitution for Oregon places limits on property tax collection. Measure 5, which was passed in 1990, limits the combined tax by general governments to $10 per 1,000 assessed value. So if all of the combined rates for all of the jurisdictions exceed $10, the local option taxes are the first to be compressed, followed by the permanent rate. And compression just means you lose out on some of your tax dollars. Measure 50 passed in 1997, which limited the growth of assessed value to no more than 3% per year for each existing property. And basis of accounting. The process of local budget law requires us to disclose our basis of accounting. The city uses a modified accrual basis of accounting, which means that we recognize revenues as soon as they are measurable and available. And they're considered available if they are collectible within a close enough period to pay current period liabilities, expenses. For us, that means 60 days of close of year. So if we receive within July and August, we consider those current year revenues. Same thing for expenses. We could potentially have an expense we pay in July and August that's related to the prior year. So our process tonight, this falls under public meeting law. I do see we might have a couple folks online. And then perhaps some here in the chambers joining us. A quorum is required for us to conduct our business tonight. We thank you for showing up to make that happen. You may ask of staff questions and even need some follow-up. At that point, you can choose to use the red line process. We can red light something and come back to it a little later in the evening. And then the majority of this board this committee sitting here needs to take action on this, so in order for it to be approved. So just to recap, we are here in the budget approval process. So we can get ready.
Yep. Thank you. The first order of business now is to do the election of officers for the Urban Renewal Budget Committee. So I will take nominations for budget chair.
I'll nominate Drew Farmer to be budget chair.
We have a nomination of Drew Farmer. Is there a second? Second. Are there any other nominations? Hearing none, I'll call for the question. All in favor of Drew Farmer being the budget chair, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed besides Drew? Hearing none. Drew, you're the budget officer, and you now need to carry forward with a selection of a vice chair and a secretary.
All righty, we'll take nominations for vice chair. Don't rush yourselves.
I'll nominate Brenda Brecky to be vice chair.
Second.
Now we have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion passes unanimous. And we need a secretary, was it? So do we have a nomination for secretary?
I'll nominate Coco Sutton.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? All right, Coco has the secretary position. So from there, we're at public comment. Do we have any public comment? I believe we're at public comment. Okay, good. No public comment, then we will move to, do we have any online public comment? Nope. All righty, we'll move to the budget message.
Okay, and we'll have a short PowerPoint, at least shorter. All right, so we are going to look at the Urban Renewal Agency's proposed 2023-2024 budget. The intent of urban renewal is to improve identified areas within the city that are either poorly developed or underdeveloped, and to eliminate blighting conditions so that we hopefully encourage economic development. In short, it's to do something that may not happen without that assistance. Revenue that we receive to carry out the urban renewal activities is derived from what's called tax increment funds. Those funds are determined by taking the total taxes that are currently on the rolls, which are used or are generated from the assessed value, to create a tax base. That is then certified as the frozen base when an urban renewal area is first initiated. From that point, everything above that base becomes the urban renewal tax increment revenue. The city of Coos Bay has two established urban renewal districts, the Downtown District and the Empire District. And the accounting for each of these districts is organized into three basic funds: a special revenue fund in which we collect the taxes, a bond fund in which we record and pay our debt, and then a capital project fund. So urban renewal resources have a required use. They can be used for real property acquisition and disposition for redevelopment. We can use them to relocate occupants of a property that we've acquired. We can use them for public improvements, such as streets, streetscapes, and public utilities. We can use it for site improvements, which includes public buildings, parks, parking facilities, and then private property capital improvements. Can also include the operational expenses that are directly related to the undertaking of urban renewal projects, and that can be administration, planning, legal, financial services. So kind of the staffing to do those things. Per the state statute, that's ORS 457, urban renewal tax increment revenues must be used to pay principal and interest on debt from loans or bonds that was used to finance those urban renewal projects. We have used both long-term and short-term loans, which we call du jour, to finance our urban renewal projects. So the downtown district currently has two issuances of debt. One is from a fiscal year 19 issuance of $3.3 million, which was used to support the infrastructure installation at Coos Bay Village, and it's also been used to work on a scrapyard on Front Street that we are working through the remediation process for eventually a parking lot. Some Front Street improvements and some streetscapes. We did refinance that debt in 21 and reduce the interest rate and had a savings over $400,000 that will be, shortened the term a little bit, it will be paid in 2028. And then the second issuance is a 2020 issuance that was for $3.4 million. The large portion of that was for the reconstruction of 4th Street. This loan matures in 2029. The Empire District has an issuance from 2018, which was $1.45 million. It was to purchase property on Ocean Boulevard, initially thought for the library site, and then also to do replacement of the Newmark Avenue seawall. This loan matures in 2027. And then in 2019, the second issuance was for $2.85 million, and that has been used to do several capital road improvement projects within Empire. This loan matures in 2028. So just a quick overview of what you see in the budget coming up. There's about $3.7 million available for either carryover projects that we're still working on or new projects. Some of those is related to Front Street Blueprint. Hopefully carrying out some of those elements identified in the blueprint. The street improvements throughout the downtown area. Some sidewalk improvements. We're working on some wayfinding signs to replace the ones that we currently have in the downtown area. Some boardwalk improvements. And this is our, what was previously known as the facade program. These are investments in downtown area properties to help bring them up to, I don't know, a nicer state that might encourage development in their area. And then we also have some funds set aside for upgrading the dispatch center. We recently took in some extra dispatchers in order to provide service to another entity, so we're kind of packed to the hilt in there. And then we have a little bit left over for projects. We've not determined what those might be just yet. In the Empire area budget, there's $2.47 million set aside, and those projects are for identified street improvement projects. We're still working on library siding. We will continue our work on the Newmark Avenue and Empire Boulevard roundabout. We are going to undertake an Empire blueprint process, much similar to the Front Street process. Empire also has that same building improvement program. And then a small bucket of leftover dollars for unknown projects that haven't been determined yet. So under certain circumstances, urban renewal agencies like the city of Coos Bays are allowed to tax additional amounts beyond the tax increment using a special levy. So starting back in 97-98, if a existing URA received less revenue from their tax increment under Measure 50 than would have been received prior to Measure 50, we can impose a special levy. And for the last several years, we have elected to do so, to impose that special levy for the use in the downtown district only. We usually have done 28%. That's what we're going to propose tonight. And those have been historically dedicated to street improvements. We are proposing $513,000 in special levy taxes, which is about 28% of the total amount that we're allowed. And I guess that's the end. If we were to tax beyond that, that does put potentially into some compression issues. So that's why we kind of picked that 28%. So we'll put the budget up, but you can walk through so the people online can see.
All righty. Everybody feel they have a thorough understanding of the urban renewal process and absolutely no conflicts or concerns about how it functions and years of development.
Drew, can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Nicole, you referenced the $1.45 million from Empire that was a loan to purchase the property on Ocean. When we sold that property, did that money go back into the URA or where did it go?
Yes, it has to go back where it was first at, and it also must be used for public projects. So we can't use those funds like to help boost up some of the building improvement programs. It must be a public property kind of project.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, we got the sheet in front of us. A lot of terminology in these documents, so if folks are looking for it, page 27 of the PDF or document page 24 has all the acronyms, or at least a good portion of the acronyms we'll be using for renewal purposes. I would say that we can probably start where the budget starts in here, if there's no one opposed to moving to PDF page 12. That is where the summary of resources begins for the budget. I'll make a small note while we get there, because I found it interesting. You'll find on there also what the frozen base was at the establishment of the urban renewal zone. So for downtown, it was a little over $50 million when it was established in 1988. Currently, it's estimated around $98 million. So that one's almost doubled since its establishment in '88. Empire District was established in '95 with a frozen base of 23 mil. It is up to 65, so that district is near tripled.
Can't really see.
It doesn't really affect much for the purpose of what we're doing, but it's worth seeing and noting the additional effects that urban renewal can have on districts as they improve the value of them. So with that, we're on, I should put my glasses on. That might help. All righty. We're on the bond and coupon redemption. I think we can go one more page from that to hit summary of resources. Give everybody a chance to look that over. Let us know if you have questions, comments, concerns. This one's fairly straightforward. Hearing none, we can move to summary of expenditures. That's the following page, PDF page 13, or document 10. Again, fairly simple. That's the summary. It doesn't go into the weeds. If we have no questions there, we'll move to the following page, Downtown Special Revenue Fund. Largely similar. We have no questions. We can move to the following. Special Revenue Fund, otherwise Fund 52.
I do have a question.
Yeah.
Yeah, on page 16, I'd like to ask what boardwalk upgrades are going to be done.
You're looking at Downtown Bond Fund?
Yeah.
Okay. Real quick, did anyone have questions under page 15?
Oh, fast.
No, it's okay. Fast is good, as long as we catch everything.
So, Drew, Chairman, how do you want to handle this if there's a question? We're going to redline it and come back to it? We're going to address it now? What procedure do you want to handle?
I would say we should probably redline it.
So if I have a question, I'll just say item such and such on page whatever and give the reference number, and then we'll come back to it and discuss it?
If you would, I'd appreciate it.
All right, thanks.
Okay. So document page 16, which item number was it so that we can redline it and come back?
It's boardwalk upgrades.
Boardwalk upgrades. And the last four of the code that's next to that.
3154.
3154, got it. I'm not seeing that.
It's in the Downtown Capital Projects Fund,
Yeah, page 16.
so it's a little bit further along than where we're at.
Oh, we're not.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm a fan of Brenda. She's moving along.
So on PDF page 16, but document page 13, do we have
That's-
anything? That's the Downtown Bond Fund. If not, we can move to document page 14. Is the Empire Bond Fund. We're slowly making our way to the docks. Document page 15, we have the Downtown Capital Projects Fund. That tends to be more interesting. Okay, moving on to document page 16, downtown capital project funds. You can see some of what's planned and then other items come up. If we have nothing there, we'll move on to document page 17. It's the capital projects fund. And then we hit document page 18, which is just a discussion of some closed funds, explaining why some numbers have moved around. For simplicity of bookkeeping and efficiency, sometimes you'll close a fund and roll it into a more appropriate fund. So that's what this part's talking about. Document page 19, we're into the ones that closed. So you can see where Empire Program Fund was rolled into Empire Capital Improvement. Downtown Fund was rolled into Downtown Capital Improvement. Downtown Bond Reserve was rolled into Downtown Bond Fund. And Empire Bond Reserve was put into the Empire Bond Fund.
Those pages by statute will remain in the budget until all of the columns are cleared out from prior years.
So we'll see those for about another 2 years.
Correct.
And I completely skipped over the part about the docks. I apologize. Did we get down? Well, actually, we're at the end, so we can circle back on that item.
Certainly. There was a question about 3154 boardwalk upgrades, and your question was what type of projects we're doing. So what we did, we know that the boardwalk is in poor shape. It's more than 25 years old, and it needs some upgrades. So we began a process of identifying what do we need to do down there. As a budgetary process, we've set aside, and we're proposing to set aside $100,000 a year over the next several years to do work. Work done recently included replacing flagpoles, upgrading the brick walkway that goes by the railroad tracks, recently replaced one of the ramps that goes down to the marina. Then we're also looking at replacing, and I always get the term wrong, bullnoses, the bench areas, those all need to be replaced. And so there's going to be a series of projects going over the next few years. And I believe we also replaced a number of lighting elements on the boardwalk. It'll take a few years to bring it back up to where it needs to be. And staff is currently and will present to the council a 5-year capital improvement plan.
For the boardwalk? Okay. Thank you.
All righty. Did anybody have anything else that they've had as an afterthought? Anything they wanted to circle back to? A curious fascination into what tax increment financing is. Perhaps a debate on its structural effect upon the state's income. Hearing none. It's definitely interesting. Moving on, we need to have a couple motions. First one, I would entertain a motion to approve option 1 pursuant to ORS 457.435-2A.
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor say aye.
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 All opposed? Motion passes unanimous. Next one we'll need is a motion to approve imposing the division of taxes and a special levy option taxes.
So moved?
Do we have a second?
Aye. Or I said the second.
That's okay. I'll let you say aye now. All in favor?
Aye.
Excellent. All opposed? Motion passes. Last one we'll need is the motion to approve the proposed fiscal year 2023 to 2024 budget that we just reviewed.
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion passes unanimous. With that, we are at the adjournment of the URA Budget Committee.
Well, welcome to the city budget committee
Y'all
meeting.
thought you got away.
Okay, well, I guess we need a couple minutes to change and get the online format moving forward.
We have time for coffee and cookies.
I can't remember, you and I talked.